the fourth industrial revolution and the future of work. So we have we are still going through something. The last 2 years, I was last in the kingdom about 2 years ago. It's great to be back. But in this period of time, we've all gone digital. And I think that's the topic today. We've gone digital from our daily work. We've gone digital in our lives, our purchases, our health, our schools. And we've started to go digital in a more fundamental way. We've actually started to change what we do, our automation, the whole idea of our work itself is changing. So I think we're going to explore all of that today. And no group better to explore it than with the leaders from Silicon Valley, from the world, and the entrepreneurs that are creating this new future for all of us. So I'm going to just get us started here, and I'm going to start with you, Gonzalo, if I could. So,
thanks, Jonathan.
As the leader of one of the leaders of our workforce, you're seeing this pandemic as an employer, and as how it's accelerating the need for these new digital skills. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, how tough is that to find those skills, and then what are you doing about it?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. So for the last couple of years, we went through a massive transformation. Okay? It was totally unplanned. It's what we call the unplanned revolution. It was forced, it was brutal, it was fast, and somehow, we had to look at what can we do, and what can we do different. But there are two areas that really drive significant concern with this unplanned transformation, because now this is becoming something that is natural. So there are two areas where I think most of the global organizations today, we need to explore on what we can do better. One is the employee loyalty, and the second one is the lack of qualified resources that we have in our space today, driven by this acceleration of the fourth industrial revolution. And when you combine both, you get into kind of a perfect storm. Because if we look at what it was, if we look back 20, 30, 40 years, what it was important for employment loyalty, it was about your salary, your paycheck, even your job physical location. If you got those three, you could even stay in the same company for your whole professional life. But this has changed, and this has changed dramatically. And now you can be based in Seattle, working in New York, and then we have to think as companies, what can we do to embrace this new paradigm? And as Micro Focus, we're working on a number of projects that we believe are important for the employees. One is the employee well-being. This is becoming extremely, extremely important. We have to help and promote our employees to have a more healthy and live in a more healthy environment, where we have to, and we push, and we have been working to create what we call some assistance programs. And we have external consultant companies where employees can contact those companies in case that they have or they need any kind of mental support. We have to give the employees the opportunity to give something back to their communities, to give something back in terms of charity. And as Micro Focus, we're giving 4 days a year to the employees so they can really take advantage of it. But probably more important is the lack of a skilled population that we have in the new paradigm. And there it's extremely important that we engage and strengthen partnership with universities. We've seen multiple of examples in the last day and a half in this event. We need to promote technology into the curriculum of the universities. We need to promote the different graduate programs that we have across the globe, and we have a number of them in Micro Focus, in the US, in Plano, we have in UKI, in Belfast, in Dublin, in Barcelona, in Spain. And I really believe that for Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, this is a huge opportunity. We heard yesterday His Excellency the Minister talking about 460 million in the MENA region that are under 35. So the opportunity is huge for the country. So yeah, really looking forward for it.
Well, it sounds like it's a striving to keep up with demand.
Absolutely.
So like, how to do that. And I'll tell you, the words healthy and tech worker often don't figure in the same sentence, but this is great to hear. So more power to you. Now, BJ, as the president of Palo Alto Networks, sort of the leader in security and privacy management and many other things, but you oversee a lot of the go-to-market functions. So perhaps we could start by there to say, as you see this phenomenon of the change in work and how it has evolved, what does that mean for your business, for security, actually?
Yeah, well, we take a security view in everything we do, and the pandemic has accelerated the need for better security. Hybrid work, digitization, e-commerce, all cry out for new ways to protect yourself. And look, at a good cybersecurity architecture can accelerate these changes. A bad one leaves you vulnerable and can put you out of business. And so I think for everybody, you have to rethink how cybersecurity will work in this day and age, in this new work environment. And it starts, we used to think of workers in an office, and we would set up perimeter around that office and know what would in and out. Now people can work from anywhere. And so now we have to think about it as, where is the individual at, and how do we protect them? How do we give them access to the resources they need to be successful in their jobs, but do that in a highly secure manner? And this is a big change for organizations. Where you work, how do we keep you protected? I think when you think about that locally, you also have to think about the Kingdom's Data Privacy Act. How do we keep the data around individuals safe and secure and local? And again, this is a rethink of security architecture, and you need to think of it holistically around the individual. I think the other thing that we talk about that the pandemic has driven is in cybersecurity, we have more jobs than we have people. And that's going to continue to happen. And one of the reasons for that is, for less than $100, an attacker can launch a full-blown attack on your company today. And any company's ability to deal with the thousands of attacks that happens is dependent today on a combination of technology and individuals. So just like Gonzalo said, we need to invest in that. We're partnering with local universities here, with 40 of them for cyber academies. We believe there's a workforce here that we can train and help make the world more secure going forward. And we'll marry that with machine learning and artificial intelligence to make those workers even more effective to help fight breaches. So, our view is, again, rethink your architecture, protect the individual, but take a holistic view to this.
And so how does that play out in the region here? Are there any sort of thoughts about that?
Well, this region has more nation-state attacks than any region. And so certainly there's a rich, robust need for security. One of the great things about this region is there's a strong public and private partnership where we can work together to build platforms that can help companies adopt world-class cybersecurity infrastructure and protect their employees and protect individuals. And I think that's unique here. One thing we embrace at Palo Alto Networks is that public-private partnership. It can really accelerate the ability to try and stay out in front of attacks rather than be reactive to them.
Well, as the parent of a 20-year-old computer science student, I'm not hearing anything bad so far. So I'm going to turn to you, Christian, and tell me, where's the fly in this particular ointment? As the leader at product strategy and innovation at Citrix, you do a lot of research about the direction of the automation, technology, employment. I know you've come up with some scenarios. Maybe say a little bit about where you see this all going and the things that we should, as employers and as employees, watch out for. What's the challenge here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as technologists, we always want to look a little bit ahead, and I think it's good for any technology provider always to be giving customers and would-be customers thought leadership, things to think about. Not just what can we solve today, but what's really happening and what are some of the trends and the things that we see, not just in technology, but in work. So we recently commissioned a very detailed piece of research, which we called Work 2035. And the idea of that really was to ask questions about the evolution of technology and the evolution of employees and try and figure out what that might look like in 2035, but how that might actually create business value in that particular time frame. And so what we actually painted were a bunch of different scenarios where we suggested that on one hand we may see workers be augmented with technology, on one hand we may see workers be completely replaced by technology. We may see organizations become more and more centralized over time, or we may see organizations become radically decentralized over time. And we ask those questions in the context of some of the technologies that we refer to often in the fourth industrial revolution. And so I'm not going to spoil the outcome of the report, and in fact I would ask you all to choose your favorite search engine and just type in Citrix Work 2035. There's some fantastic detailed information in there and a great summary, so I won't spoil the surprise. But I will give you a couple of data points that I think are kind of important. So the first one, and I think it's actually a very positive thing, that 70% of the respondents that we had to the survey, which was in all industries and literally all four corners of the globe, so 70+% of all the respondents felt that by 2035, AI would be intrinsic in helping them make better business decisions. Every single respondent, bar a few, actually said that by 2035, they believe that new technology interfaces and new technology environments will help them be more productive and also more proficient in the work that they do. So that's the positive piece. But what was really interesting actually was the difference that we saw in the respondents who were the business leaders versus the respondents who were the employees today. And we actually noticed that the business people have a far higher expectation of the impact of technology on overall output and productivity than the employees themselves. So the way I think about that, and we hear this over and over again in the context of fourth industrial revolution, automation and job displacement. So I think right now there's a definite sign that employees are a little bit worried, although they are reluctantly accepting that technology will help. They're a little bit worried about what the future might look like. So you can kind of understand that, I suppose, from certainly, the research stretches back from 2019, and we concluded it in 2021. So we have some excellent data points from before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and as, thankfully we're coming out of the pandemic. But this digital divide, I think, poses a really interesting question. What will business owners do in terms of their expectation by 2035, the business leaders? Will they continue to push, or will they come back more towards the employee expectation? And the employees, will they move more towards where the business leaders want to go, or will they try and be comfortable in the world that they know today? So in the report, we have some great conclusions in that. But I think perhaps the most interesting thing, certainly from where we are today, is to think about not necessarily about how many jobs we'll lose through automation, because that's not a new question. If we go back to automotive manufacturing or manufacturing in general, over the last 100 years, there have been so many jobs that have been displaced. But they've also been replaced by net new jobs as a result of things in that industry or brand new industries, which we're going to hear from in a moment, that simply didn't exist. So I think that balance from a business and an employee perspective is a really interesting one, and it'll be fascinating in 2035 to see who was right.
Yeah, that is wonderful. It's true, of course. When we got the interstate highway, we might have lost the horse and buggies, but we got Howard Johnson's. So I mean, it's funny how technology plays out. I want to come back to what you're doing in Citrix, but first of all, Mohammed, so you are the new economy, literally. I mean, it's like new. And I think your story, which we heard about the Hope Prize and getting it started now, is just a classic. But why don't you tell us a little bit about, that whole this idea of creating a new class of jobs. Where does it come from? I mean, is it entirely new? Does it come out of some other? Just a little bit more about the business model and how you plan to find the talent for it.
Yeah, for sure. Assalamu alaikum. I was actually born in Jeddah, and I grew up in Saudi Arabia for 12 years, so it's really nice to be back. To tell you a little bit about my view on this, I think it begins with a basic factual view that the vast majority of jobs in the future are going to come from startups. And that's a profound change because 50 years ago, the cost and barriers to starting a company were very significant. Today, you can start a company in an afternoon with like a couple $100. And this is why we're seeing a proliferation of startups around the world. And my story is a very classic example, and hopefully, something that can inspire optimism about what's possible. Because I am a very unlikely entrepreneur. I was training to be a neurosurgeon, and when I was in medical school, I came across a business competition called the Holt Prize, which is considered the Nobel Prize for social enterprises. And the idea was to inspire students to build a business that can address a major global challenge. And in 2013, that challenge was food security. Our planet is rapidly growing in population and appetite, but it's also shrinking in resources with which to produce food. And that creates an opportunity such that if you could find a way to produce a lot more food using a lot less resources, you could have an incredible competitive advantage in this new world we're all embracing. And so our insight was, if we can to identify a source of protein that is abundant in the world and widely consumed, but nobody's figured out a way to produce it commercially at scale. And of course, for us, that was insects. And ultimately, we ended up defeating 10,000 companies from around the world. We won this $1 million Holt Prize. It gave us the seed capital to start our business. Of course, it also meant that I had to sit down with my, immigrant Egyptian parents and explain to them why I'm going to drop out of medical school to farm crickets. But what it gave rise to was a new industry. I mean, what we're building is not a new company within a pre-established framework of an industry. We're actually building the very scaffolding of a new industry of protein production that is fully automated indoors using climate-controlled agriculture, big data, robotics. And what that means is we're not just creating direct new jobs. So whether it's entomologists that we're hiring out of school, not to figure out how to kill insects, which is what typically most entomologists are trained to do, pesticide control, but rather to figure out more efficient ways to increase yield for human or animal nutrition. So there's direct jobs we're creating in data and AI and machine learning, but there's also indirect jobs we're creating. So now, for example, there's new regulation that has to be established around insect consumption. And so that means that in the FDA and the USDA, there's new jobs that are being created to deal with this. It means there's new jobs being created in academia. We actually just launched the Canada's first research chair at the University of Laval on insect agriculture. And there's now a new wave of new researchers who are hiring graduate students and starting new lines of research as a result of the work we're doing. So I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of job creation. And in fact, my concern is not so much, and this is my personal view, but I think that there's a misplaced moral panic around the idea that there's going to be this massive unemployment issue. I don't think the issue is it's not going to be that we won't have enough jobs. I think it's that the gap between the jobs of the future and the skills that people have today is massive. And I think that if we can redirect that concern, instead to focusing on how do we reskill people to bridge that gap, I think we'll have an incredibly, incredibly bountiful future.
Well, just picking up on your example, and I'm going to go back in this order all the way back, just focusing on one question, this question. So do you think that those jobs will be found by educating people or by attracting them and letting them develop in your job itself? In other words, will you find them in the marketplace, or will you have to do it yourself?
In our case, we had to do both. There are some jobs that we were able to source readily, albeit there's a customization aspect because of what we do and the specificity around it. But in many cases, we've actually had to train people. There is no such thing as a cricket farm technician, right? There isn't off-the-shelf automated cricket irrigation systems. We have to build these things from scratch. I think what was exciting for us, though, is the recognition that learning curve, even if it feels very steep, we have an incredibly motivated and very hungry, group of young people who are coming into the workforce. And I think what's tied hand in hand with that, and I'll turn it over to you and Christian, is the understanding that businesses, one of the biggest competitive advantages they have to have now is something deeply fulfilling and purposeful that employees are drawn to. In fact, it is no longer attainable and it's no longer sustainable for companies to have a mission or a vision that doesn't directly benefit the planet and the future in some way. And I think so long as you have that in the DNA of your organization, people will be willing to make the sacrifices, learn, commute, get up that learning curve, and you'll have an outsized advantage when it comes to attracting talent.
Christian?
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty interesting view on this, and it largely speaks to the problem that BJ talked about, which is, in the tech industry, we have far more jobs than people. And I think many times we're drawn towards formal education as the only way into that. And I think if you try and make that equitable across the world, not everybody has the same opportunity. And yet the next generation of individual are literally born digital. We talk about digital immigrants, digital natives. You look around at the next wave of the workforce and they are born technologists. So I think maybe what we need to do is balance formal with semi-formal and then literally on-the-job education, because we have to realize that the steps for our generation to get into technology don't really exist in the way that the new generation comes in. So I think the problem that we're trying to avoid is this sort of gap between the jobs that are available and the jobs that can be filled. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to sort of look at this in a slightly different way. Formal education is incredibly important, of course, but as I said, not everybody gets the same opportunities. And I think we're doing a disservice to younger people if we don't think about that in the terms of maybe apprenticeships or on-the-job skills that are equally important.
Makes sense. DJ?
I agree with it completely. I think the challenges we have in education are some of these categories of jobs will come from very specific skill areas, like cybersecurity. So I often, think of, did my biology class help me, with my cybersecurity skills? And so in some ways we have to rethink how we educate also, and target specific areas to accelerate the ability for human capital to take advantages of the opportunities that are out there. The other thing I would just say is the pace of change just continuously accelerates. And in any role, whether you're a digital native or old like myself, you have to continuously learn. You have to embrace continuous learning to stay out in front of this so we can marry resources to opportunities.
It just gets faster. BJ, you have literally the last, sorry, Gonzalo, you have literally the last word.
Sure, yeah, no, I fully agree with them. But I really believe that education and online education is absolutely critical. And in our technology space, there is no room for failure. You make a mistake, the consequences are very severe. So, when you have to develop emergency COVID application for citizens, as we did here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you cannot fail. And the people working on it, they cannot fail. They have to be properly educated. When you have to, to manufacture a car and you need 1 million lines of code that has to be tested, you cannot fail. So yeah, education, absolutely critical. Yeah.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, the future of work. Onwards to a great and exciting panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.